Hey, good people. Welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is Kate Deering. Kate has been involved in the fitness and wellness world for over 25 years. She has a great book you can easily find on Amazon called How to Heal Your Metabolism. It's a fantastic book, and I highly recommend it for everyone. Kate and I have a great chat about diet and lifestyle and her journey through it, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. So, when like in the Ray Peat world, when people look, because everybody who gets into the Ray Peat world sort of wants like, hey, give me a book or give me something that I can do. And there's really no Ray Peat book, besides his articles and all that stuff. So your book seems to be like the, Ray Peat Bible, I think of it as, I think a lot of people go to it.
It's definitely the entry book for sure.
Yeah. And I love that. And I reference it to a lot of people. But like, going way back, what kind of led you to writing that book? How did you get to that part?
Well, probably the same experience, right? So I got into his work and I got obsessed like very quickly. And when I start getting obsessed, it's literally like I would spend every waking hour watching a video, reading an article, because it was just like mind blowing to me. And then when I kind of started applying it to my clients, it was so hard for me to try to wrap it all together to help them understand it. There was and it was just so much. And most people just don't want to. So that's when I decided, I'm like, there needs to be a better way to understand this. So I took everything that I did and I just broke it down and I just started writing articles, and everything in the book is like, I probably wrote it and just reformulated because I wrote it in different times, and I just said, and that's what I did. It became an obsession for me. And then it became bigger than I ever thought. It was supposed to be like 100 pages and 300 and then, plus. And that's where I just that's how it happened.
Yeah. And so you're saying you were already in the fitness industry when you went through that kind of wake up call experience.
Oh yeah. I've been in the fitness
How did you get into fitness
25
industry?
years.
25 years. So what was your first, how did you get into it at first?
In Atlanta, I got into it working at health clubs.
Okay.
So I started running health clubs in Atlanta. I ran health clubs for 10 years.
Okay.
And trained people on the side. And so I basically did the management part of it all. And then I literally hated it at the end because it was just, because you're dealing with all the fires, right? And it was like, it wasn't fitness anymore. It was just dealing with everyone's headaches or whatever that and so then I moved to California.
Was it like a 24-hour fitness, LA Fitness kind of thing?
No, it was a private gym. We had 3 facilities.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I actually knew the guy from the first health club I worked at. He left and opened up his own facility and I went with him. So we opened up a gym and then we had 2 more. So we had 3. Yeah. And then I just ran that. And then, I did other basically things in there and did some training and so forth. But I just, I was doing a lot of bad things in my life at that point too. I mean, I was a super partier girl.
Atlanta type.
Atlanta type. Atlanta was a big party town.
Yeah. A-town. That's what
the health club people were like the party people, and that's what we did.
Were you like a marathon runner or a triathlete kind of person?
Not yet. I didn't do that.
So you got into it later, though. You see, there's always I know so many people that are like triathletes or love their Ironmans, and all of them fucking love getting wasted, love partying. They love going hard after they.
Well, I did that. Yeah. So I did all the partying. I was a big tennis player in Atlanta. So I was a massive tennis player. And then when I came here, I decided to get healthier. So I got out of the partying, still drank a considerable amount, but started getting my obsessions everywhere. And then I got in some long distance marathons, long distance cycling, got into that kind of world. I never did a triathlon, interesting enough, because I'm not a big swimmer.
It's too much.
But but I started to, realize how unhealthy a lot of these habits was. And so but then, that's when I got to the Czech Institute. I did a natural health institute nutrition program.
Yeah, I've heard of that. So your first big fitness whatever certification or thing that you followed was Paul Chek's kind of system.
No, it was ACE.
Oh yeah, okay, I have that too.
2 other programs. Then I did NHI, National Holistic Institute or Health Institute. It's up in Encinitas.
Yeah,
I did a 2-year nutrition program with them.
Oh wow, okay.
And then I found Czech and did a lot of the exercise corrective classes. I did the nutrition class, I think two of them. And Czech has some good stuff, and that was a good kind of way to go. It went from, because when I was younger, we grew up in a world of processed food. It was all about calories, and then it was all about no fat, or then it was all about no sugar.
So it's always about a thing. Yeah.
It's always about removing, and everything was correlated to weight loss.
Right. That's, it's because I sort of grew up differently. I grew up in Russia, and in Russia was kind of different. It was just more about eating real food, and not to show off or whatever, but I think it's just because you don't have the availability of stuff that you have here in America. So it's it's just eating real food, normal food. So when I first found out Paul Chek, when I was young here in, Los Angeles, it was like, yeah, that makes sense. It was for a lot of people though. And of course it doesn't, right? Because they're eating Fritos or whatever, just random stuff. So yeah. And so how was your experience? How far up the chain did you work up with the Paul Chek?
I only did the exercise coach 1, and then I did the nutrition coaching 2.
Oh, okay.
And it was in the nutrition coaching 2 that Josh Rubin was teaching that I met him. And he, I think, must have been getting into it because he was starting to waver, like some things he was trying to teach us, but they're so against the Czech's philosophi.
Oh, yeah. Well, so you must have had a fungal infection. That's my full Paul Chek impression there.
Czech's an interesting guy.
Of course. And hey, I'm with you.
Met him, he's very bright, but he has definitely some interesting philosophies. And I don't know if he still utilizes his same nutrition protocol. I don't know. I mean, he was very much about metabolic typing diet. Yeah. I mean, that was the basic book. And then even his own approach certainly kind of went into that and utilized that to figure out, what foods were best for you, whether carbs, protein, or fat type.
Right.
And that's pretty generalized. And so.
And I agree with you. I don't think he's, like you said, he's out there. But the big takeaway I think that people should get from Paul Chek is just eating normal, real foods, right? It's like, hey, I mean, he's at least he doesn't say, don't eat fruit. I think he's definitely all for fresh fruits and vegetables and just normal grown stuff and, stuff that's not filled with garbage and pesticides and all kinds of things. So I think that's great, but definitely against kind of some of the sugars, the 4 white devils, which are things that sugar, white flour,
dairy, flour,
white salt.
And sugar.
So at that time, what was your training and what was your diet like when you were going through these courses?
With Chek?
Yeah. Just at that time period,
Chek, it became all organic, but after I did my metabolic typing diet, I was a protein type. So that meant a lot of meat. Yeah. I mean, I like egg whites, probably meat. I mean, it was very low carb, even though it was low carb before it was low carb. Yeah. And so, but it was quality. Like it wasn't some of the packaged garbage, all the
you weren't eating like keto bars. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I think that's the great thing about that,
Right, exactly. And it was better, right? It was better than I would. And I was, because as you go through your, I guess, health history and your health journey, you might pick a diet that makes you better. It might not be the best diet yet, right? Because every kind of shift I made, I think, was better than what I was doing. And I think it produced some results until it didn't.
Yeah.
Right. So that actually, I got lean on that approach, and I almost felt better because I wasn't eating some of the other low calorie things that I thought were healthier.
Right.
Yet in time, because it was so carb, sugar deficient, and it was very low fruit. Yeah. I think it started to play, and I was in massive endurance activity at that point too. So my metabolism unknowingly was coming to a grinding halt.
So when you were training there, that's another great thing about Paul is that he does actually talk about how people overdo on the cardio. So I don't know, but you were definitely a cardio fiend in that time, huh?
Yeah, I just liked events. Oh. I was very competitive, so I was in a lot of running events. Yeah, I just liked events. I always did a lot of running events at that point in time. I mean, I taught a lot of boot camps. So I myself were teaching like 4 boot camps, and then I would take another 2 boot camps. It was all just intensity and a lot. And then I would still run on some of these days. I mean, it was lots of activity, 2-3 hours. Plus I would be training 6 or 7 hours a day. And
that's
then,
like
that, and you think everything you're doing is so healthy.
Right.
That how could you possibly not be feeling well?
It's a strange thing, right? Yeah, it's a strange thing that it's like I'm training every day, I'm working out, and also when you start feeling like crap, I think what a lot of people do is they double down, right? It's like, well, fuck, I don't feel that great. You know what? I think I'm going to make my run a little bit longer today, and I'm going to cut out more of the fruits and more of the sugar and just go, full keto or whatever.
Yep. Well, and if anytime I work with people, that's what happens to them, right? It's almost like some go vegan and then they realize, okay, maybe I need, so they might go paleo, and then from paleo they get better, but then it's some other stuff's hard and they start having some gut issues. So then, they go keto or carnivore, and it kind of clears up and they think they've found the holy grail, and then all of a sudden they fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
And so you see that a lot.
Yeah. And it's tough because there's so many voices out there and so much stuff to learn. And, I've been there too, where I felt like crap and I thought, well, maybe it is a fungal infection. So maybe I got to go on the antifungal diet where I was just eating, greens and meats pretty much. And, but the strange thing is that your body is so adaptable that you do feel good, I think, for a while, right? I guess just everybody crashes different, at different times.
Well, and I think again, I mean, depending on what the diet does, if it's producing a low level of adrenaline and cortisol while you're doing things, that does feel good. And if you were having a lot of bacterial overgrowth, probably because the bowel was slow and the fibers weren't being digested, then get rid of all those. Yeah, it feels better, So there are some things that initially do feel better, but then all of a sudden your hormonal system's going to shut down.
Yeah.
You're going to be depleted of minerals. I mean, all these things start happening. They just don't happen immediately.
Yeah, and on top of that, you're probably drinking a lot of water too, which is also in that system, right? Of I think it's like half your body weight in ounces, which is quite a bit of water.
I don't even know how half. I remember looking all that up, like how do we get to these numbers? Recommendations? Like 64 ounces, half your body weight, a gallon, and there's really no scientific backing on any of it.
No. Well, and like you said, and not to talk down on Paul Chek, because I do think a lot of his stuff is great, but the way that he kind of or people in that circle go about it is that they kind of get it to the spiritual side of things. And I don't know, sometimes and that's great, and I love, I'm a big fan of Osho. I mean, I've done a lot of meditation stuff, and I think it's great, but I think people kind of just have that as their backup, like, well, you don't know what you're talking about, so it's just you gotta listen to your spirit more, and you gotta do this. And I think people get even more confused because it's like, hey, if I'm listening to my spirit, honestly, this ice cream is telling it sounds good to me. I really want to eat ice cream, because their idea is like, well, just listen to your spirit. Your spirit's not going to tell you to want to eat ice cream. It's like it kind of is. I kind of want to eat the ice cream. Do you know what I'm saying?
And I think, like, and again, I mean, whatever. When people, I mean, I have a very spiritual side as well, and I don't know if it's really interrelated to the food choices I have, but maybe on other levels, it helps my health, because I think there are certainly more levels than just diet.
Yeah.
And but to me, at the end of the day, it's like whatever works for you.
Yeah.
And maybe what I'm doing now in 5 years won't work, and I'll have to have a different sense of what to do to fix it. Right. So I don't know. Right now it works. Could that change? Possibly. I'm not kind of totally married to any idea at this point, because it seems to be always evolving, and we're always changing, and there seems to be, and I think when your body shifts and there's new stressors, then you have to look at things a little bit differently.
Right. And in my low carb days, I mean, I remember when I would feel stressed or just tired from, doing an all day work and then doing a workout in the gym, I really wanted to eat some ice cream at night, and I would eat and I would sleep great. Mm-hmm. And I just, I figured that out intuitively, but, if you read anywhere online, even the current science, quote unquote, or whatever, it's all bad. I think it's so tough for people right now nowadays to kind of figure out what to do with their bodies,
Well, my thought is that literally nothing in today's world, no matter what you're talking about, politics, nutrition, economy, not a lot of context is ever given to help explain something. There's just like little blibbits of things that are thrown out there, and then people interpret them without a bigger understanding of why they're coming to that conclusion.
Right.
And so I think nutrition is, there's all of these perceptions and ideas about good and bad and whatever. And then when you kind of look at where they're getting that idea from and how they've decided that is good or bad, it contextually doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah.
At least when you utilize human physiology, you're like, but right. I mean, yeah, if you give a really sick person a bunch of sugar and metabolically there's cellular deficiencies and they don't really metabolize it well, yeah, you're going to create a really sick person. And yes, you could get diabetes. So, but context has to be given there, and versus a healthy person and the type of sugars and how they're being delivered and what else are they eating,
Yeah.
all of that makes a difference.
It requires a little bit of work, and people just kind of want that 60-second Instagram post, right?
They
Or
do.
that little thing
Yeah.
blip, and like you said, and even race stuff gets, I think, misinterpreted, because sometimes you'll hear a clip and you're like, well, why the hell is he recommending that? And and you got to understand that he's looking at this huge picture of a person, and he's talking about all kinds of things that are happening, and I think that's where people get confused.
Yeah. And he's, like I said, I mean, his answers change depending on the context and on the person and whatever is happening to them. So, that's why even when he says things and people kind of interpret like eat this diet, I'm like, well, just because he can do that doesn't mean you can do that. And it's like that's what he's shifted in his. Is that maybe the most ideal thing to do? Possibly, but you can't get there from A to Z overnight. And if you tried to, it's probably going to make you sick. So
it's a process.
There's a little of a transition that has to happen.
Yeah. And so you were taking these classes and you met Josh Rubin, and Josh Rubin sort of started, how do you say, going against the grain there. And when did you have a sort of a boom, wake up moment, or was it a slow transition? How did you start going away?
No, I think he just made some suggestions and made me question things. And I literally would go home and who is he talking about? This Ray Peat. And I would start reading these things within the class. It was almost like he wasn't allowed to talk about it, but he did talk about it, and I knew him. So I was like, wait, what?
Oh, okay.
Started talking about temperature and pulse and things like that. And I would go and measure myself, and I'm like, I'm like 96 degrees. That doesn't seem to make sense. I had never taken my temperature other than when I was sick. So I had no clue.
Right. And intuitively, you would think that you want your temperature to be low. You want your pulse rate to be low, because that's a sign of a healthy heart, right? Because you're running a lot, so your pulse slows down.
Yeah, I don't even know if intuitively. I mean, definitely low pulse. I don't know if I've had an intuitive thought about body temperature. It wasn't even something I considered. It wasn't I knew I was cold a lot, especially when I dieted. I mean, looking back at my life and going, oh my God, I was like in college, I was just freezing all the time. I was pretty petite, and I did tons of cardio and ate very little. I was very restrictive on my calories, and freezing all the time. And I would binge, and I would definitely have these fluctuations in weight, and then I'd have to go back to be really restrictive, and I was always angry that I had friends that didn't have to do any of that and could stay the same weight, and I had to control it with calories and exercise, and I just didn't have a concept of really what I was doing to myself.
Right.
I thought it was all in the name of health, and I really was like counterproductive essentially.
So temperature was kind of the first thing that you started measuring and keeping track of, and your pulse, huh?
Temp, pulse, and then I dove deep in, right? So it was just, that's when my obsession, because it totally shook every belief system I had about fitness and exercise and how we're supposed to do it. And, it was more exercise, eat less, more restrictive,
Right.
Everything was being challenged.
Were you experiencing any other symptoms that, like you said, you also looking back, you're like, oh, I always had this problem. Like I know with a lot of women that I work, it's like a very common one is, two common ones for me. It's like constipation and menstrual cycle problems. Super common these days, I feel like, with women.
Yep. I mean, looking back, I used to take tons of supplements to have a regular bowel movement. It was just a normal thing. I just thought that was normal. And a lot of them had ephedra in them. Well,
that'll clean you out. Yeah, I've done that.
Right? So those started tapering off, or there was just tons of caffeine I would take in the morning.
Yeah.
Right, to trigger a bowel movement.
Yeah.
I always had supplements. And I went through times it was different ones, but there was always something I usually took. Like I said, looking back, I mean, were the bowels pretty? No. Was sleep starting to be disruptive? And I started having some skin issues, dry skin. I mean, a lot of things. It was like premature aging, essentially. And your brain, you just think, oh, this must be what 40 is going to be like. I didn't know.
That was around the time when you were about 40, you're saying that this kind of switch started happening to you, yeah?
About 38, 39.
38, 39. Okay. And so you started reading, going really deep. And what was some of you said it shook up a lot of your beliefs. I mean, what was the big one, sugar? Or what was the big things that changed for
I
you?
think it was definitely sugar. Like it took me a while to get my head wrapped around that, I mean, it took me probably 2 years to even put sugar in my coffee.
Right.
I still use stevia because I was like, why would I possibly want to add sugar? And I would hear Ray talk.
Wow,
and he'd
because
be like,
stevia
why would
tastes
you
like
not?
shit. Sorry.
It does.
I think it tastes like shit.
But I was convinced it was fine. But I just didn't understand why putting more calories in something like sugar, like why am I going to put these unneeded calories? Like that never made any sense to me. Mm-hmm. Why would I add more calories? Why would I add this? There's no nutrition in this. Why would I do these things? So I didn't. I added definitely more fruits. I mean, when I did change, I did a lot of shifts. Like all of a sudden drank a bunch of dairy. All of a sudden started having a ton more fruit. Reduced muscle meats a ton. Like I went from like chicken 3 times a day to none.
Yeah.
Had more fish and I got rid of like all the oatmeal and all the oat milks, almond milks, all of that. And just some of the, I mean, I just removed all the bars. I was eating some bars at that time. Mm-hmm. So it was a big shift. Mm-hmm. I mean, I consumed an enormous amount of saturated fat from like nothing to a ton.
Yeah.
My cholesterol did. It went from 170, I think, to like 330.
Oh, so when you were low carb, you weren't even consuming a lot of like saturated. You were just sticking to lean meats, pretty much. Huh?
It was because again, my low carb was protein type.
Oh boy, you went really deep. I got mixed type because again, and looking back to, I remember like answering those questions, and I was thinking like, I like meat, but I also love ice cream. Like that was always my thing, And so I ended up being a mixed type. So for me, I was eating like, just ground beef, whatever, 20% fat. And I never really kind of watched out for the beef too much. Ate a lot of avocados, but you were really going lean, huh? So you were just eating protein mostly.
It was.
What was like a typical daily kind of diet for you back then?
I'd say a lot of egg whites. I would put some oatmeal and I'd put a scoop of protein powder. So I was adding a lot of either whey protein or making, protein shakes.
Okay.
I would make a shake, and I remember it was like I'd put a bunch of greens in the shake.
You've been there, done
and
that.
Probably some berries, some protein powder, and then like some sugar-free almond milk.
Oh wow.
With stevia.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
So
then maybe a chicken salad. There was lots of greens. I mean, huge salad. I make huge salad with chicken or
tuna.
Tuna. Yeah, I had gotten.
You never went to the tuna route.
When I worked in the gyms, I ate so much tuna that it was like I couldn't. It was just a lot of chicken. Tons. Occasionally beef here and there, maybe occasionally salmon or some seafood, but it was a lot of chicken. Oh and then maybe that night I would like saute up a bunch of like broccoli, cabbage, like a lot of cruciferous vegetables. I rarely ate a potato ever.
Wow.
And more chicken, right? So huge pile.
Hardcore Kate. Wow.
And then if I had like a snack, something sweet, it would be some nuts, right? With some berries things in there or something, or some, maybe some berries, or I'd probably get some sugar-free. It would be like maybe, these sugar-free pops or something. I don't know.
Icicle
something. It was nothing exciting. If anything ever exciting came into my house, I would eat a ton of it. Ice cream could not be in my house. Anything good, I would eat it.
So very high carb, lots of greens too. You said so the big thing.
Very low carb. Low carb.
Sorry. I meant protein. High carb. Yeah. Low. Yeah. High protein, low carb, a lot of greens. And then you said you started eating. So the first big change was like eating a lot of meat, or higher fat.
Well, I reduced the meat. When I shifted, all of a sudden I started consuming a lot of dairy. So then I started eating the whole egg. Mm-hmm, right. Mm-hmm. I hadn't been eating egg yolks. I mean, it was fairly low fat too. It was just high protein, low glycemic carbohydrates. Mm-hmm. And some probably complex, in form of like oatmeal. I might have done some brown rice here and there, some quinoa or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so you said your cholesterol shot up really high, and you think that's
when I went from that approach and I added saturated fat and a ton more sugar in. Mm-hmm. I think my body was like, like, I remember my doctor calling me. She's like, have you done something different? She's like, your cholesterol almost doubled. Right. And I didn't like freak out because I kind of realized what was happening, and it was, a system. I mean, again, I had been like what I had, if I had fats, they were primarily polyunsaturated. So there were a lot of nuts, seeds, and so no saturated fat, very low sugar. And so I think my system was just kind of trying to regulate. I was producing a ton more cholesterol, and I was probably in a pretty inflamed state. So it was probably a normal state for my body to do. I think my true state of hypothyroidism was showing up, kind of in that suppressed state. It all looks good, but I mean, if you kind of remove all the things that might make cholesterol, essentially low sugar, low saturated fat, it kind of looks good, but essentially I was very hypothyroid.
Yeah.
And so adding all those things kind of made my body start creating a lot of cholesterol. I did have some just adverse hormonal things because I just went all in, which I never advise anyone to do anymore. And it settled. In about 6 months, it settled for me. Okay. And then because I gained a little bit of weight too, and that kind of settled. And then I kind of reined it in a little bit better. I wasn't all crazy like I was in the beginning. And then everything kind of settled down for me.
And so you dropped the greens too. Was that like a also overnight kind of thing? You just dropped them, stopped eating a lot of all the broccoli, and all the chard?
I think I had a little separation anxiety with the greens, like anything.
Like a lot of people do.
I reduced them significantly. I maybe had a couple of salads. And I went, mostly I was doing like squashes and peppers and onions. I did all that. Those were kind of my options.
Yeah, which are more technically fruit, right? Peppers and tomatoes and all those
yes,
kind of
they're
things.
more kind of vegetable fruits. Correct.
Yeah.
So,
because it's tough, and I don't know how much time you spend convincing people these days, but it's so hard to get people to think that maybe these greens are not really an optimal food for like a human body. And I don't know, how do you get people to start thinking about that?
I mean, I think anyone it's at some level I always ask, usually if someone's doing a lot of greens, I always ask how digestion's doing, because you see a lot of it in the stool. And then I just have them think, I'm like, look, you're eating a leaf essentially, and it's bound in tons of fiber, and you are not a cow. You do not have a rumen. It's really hard for your body to break that food down. Now, if you're in a state where you're having a hard time utilizing or getting enough energy, well, just think about how much energy it's going to take for your body to try to pull some nutritional value out of that leaf that's basically providing it with zero energy, right? So you're basically taking from your system. And when you're trying to heal, we need to give you some deposits, right? We can't keep taking withdrawals. And that's what, to me, like eating a ton of leafy greens with nothing else it's a withdrawal because it takes more energy to get stuff out of that than it's giving you.
Yeah.
And so, I don't tell some people, I'm like, if you're going to do them, obviously cook them really well. Or sometimes I have people throw them in a smoothie just a little bit if that makes them psychologically feel better.
which is big.
People are like, I need to have, they feel like they need to have them.
And it's funny that you said, the ones that eat the most greens, usually they're like, well, I have to eat them because I have digestive problems if I don't. And I'm like, why? So you have digestive problems. So it seems like the people that eat the most greens usually have some sort of digestive problems or constipation problems. And it takes a while for them to put the two and two together, that it's like, maybe you shouldn't want to eat that.
Yeah. Well, you're conditioned, right? Like you need more fiber, right? Fiber helps remove toxins from the small intestine and the colon, right? And so lack of fiber, you might not be able to remove as much toxins. And I'm like, well, okay, but on the same level that this undigestible fiber is actually feeding the exact bacteria you might be trying to get rid of, and it's slowing gut transient time because it's undigestible. And if for some reason you're in some sort of hypometabolic state, energy is not going towards the gut, then you're going to have a reduced level of foods being broken. I mean, your digestive system gets hit on so many levels when you don't have enough energy.
Yeah.
Right. And we have our two systems, right? We have a sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight, and you have your parasympathetic, your rest and digest. It's in the rest and digest for a reason, because you actually need to rest for the energy to go into the gut so that it can actually do everything it needs to be doing. And as soon as you're in that stress position, which everybody is in today's world, everyone's in like fight or flight all the time.
Big time.
Right.
Yeah.
No energy flow is going into the gut area, right? So digestive enzymes are decreased, or stomach enzymes are decreased, pancreatic enzymes are decreased, transit time. I mean, every hydrochloric acid is depleted or lower. Everything gets depleted. Yeah. And so then you have undigested food moving into the small intestine, creating it to be slow. Then bacteria goes in the small intestine. So you get all of these things start happening. And then you add more undigested food to get in there, or more hard to digest food into there, and you just keep overloading it, right? And it just creates this symphony of, think about your intestinal area is hot, warm. Go get some greens, especially now. Be hot for the next 2 weeks in California. Yeah. Just leave them out and see how well they do in your hot.
Yeah, I love that little Ray. Ray gives that example of take a baggie and put some greens in there, and then take another baggie, put a carrot in there and put them in your pocket. Sure. And after a while, the greens are going to be just mushy and disgusting looking, and the carrot will be fine, which is what's happening in your gut, I guess. But of course, if you're healthy, right, and you're 20 years old and you eat a giant plate of greens, I think you're fine. But basically what ends up happening if you're not healthy is you're creating this huge problem. And I think what people end up doing then is they just start eating less and less and less because they don't feel good, or they feel constipated, kind of stuffy because they have all that stuff going on in their gut. And then they eat less, and then they tell you, well, I'm intermittent fasting, so I'm doing much better when I'm not eating.
Yeah. Well, and that's what the keto and carnivore diets did for people. Right. Carnivore more, though, than keto, I guess, because keto still adds some greens in there. But carnivore basically removes all these carbohydrates, all of them. And, when you actually remove the food that's going slow and creating the bacterial overgrowths, and you remove them entirely, you're going to feel better. Yeah. But it's just creating this Band-Aid. Yeah. Because now you're depleting yourself on other things. You're not getting enough carbohydrate because you need your energy source, right? You have to have it. And if if all you're going to do now is give your body meat and fat, somewhere along the line, it's going to have to convert that, which creates a stress system, right? To create some sort of gluconeogenesis to get the glucose that you actually need to run your system. So it's kind of a backdoor approach, I think, that can work temporarily until you're, especially for women, I see it. I mean, their hormones just go into the gutter after 6 months or a year, and then they're in a nice deep hole of everything sucks, and at that point they're having a hard time digesting everything.
A lot of women that do the low carb diets and a lot of cardio, they lean out, but boy, they don't feel good. They don't feel good. Oh no. So so the greens is one kind of thing, and another big thing that people have a hard time wrapping their minds around is dairy, because dairy, I mean, we are the only animals that eat other animals' milk. Did you know that, Kate? And so they say this a lot of times, and they kind of find dairy disgusting, and they always reach for almond milk or, what is it now? Oat milk. They have so many new fucking milks that they create now. Don't you think it's? I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if they have like a bamboo milk. I mean, it's just crazy the amounts of milks they're creating. I'm just like, do you really think that's something you should be drinking regularly?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can look at least dairy studies and at least see there's a history of research on milk, and is all of it good? Nope. Is there a lot of beneficial? I mean, but like with every food, I think it's really hard to just control that variable and to see. So you do have to look at cultures. You do have to kind of look at what the food provides and how it's digested to kind of really assimilate into our physiology. Is it more optimal? So can you find bad studies with milk? Yeah, because they're basically using a consensus form, asking people, do you drink milk? What else do you do? I smoke, I do this. Like, okay, milk is correlated with higher heart disease. And so
it's like the meat studies, right? It's like, well, I go to Wendy's every day. I eat a lot of meat. And it's just like, well, that's not what we're talking about, my friend.
Right. And in a world where, right, and you can probably look at it in a lot of areas where people maybe are eating a lot of conventionally farmed dairy, they just might be eating a lot of other, people, as they say, who are more health-minded, might be making other healthier choices, even though almond milks aren't healthier, but maybe they're just exercising more, or they're not over-consuming, or they're not eating processed foods or fast food. So you have to look at the whole picture to kind of see, well, what else are they doing? Right. Is it the milk causing it, or is it the other 7 bad habits that they're doing right now that they're creating that issue? And that's why it's hard to really look at a lot of studies and go, okay, definitively, if you do this, this is going to happen, right? So, but going back to just research, at least we can study cultures. We can look at cultures that are high dairy consuming cultures, and we see that they are usually much healthier, and they live longer, and they have lower heart disease and lower cancers. So we have to take that into consideration, and also just understanding, okay, milk is a filtered food. It has a high level of calcium in it that we do need, and optimal sugars help calcium absorption, good fat, good protein, balanced food, and see that, okay, all those things are supported, where we can see something like processed almond milk or nut milk or soy milk or any of these other ones. We basically have very little research on at all.
Yeah, and lots of additives too that people don't even know. Carrageenan, gore gums, and all these fucking things that people don't know anything about. But I mean, how do you know, because people are, again, for example, when you switched over from being high protein, in that time, were you consuming dairy? And when you started drinking more dairy, did you have issues with it, or you were fine?
I didn't have digestibility. I mean, when I switched, I was a big almond milk drinker. That was my gig.
Almond breeze, right?
Yeah. And I think I went to, first milk I started with was like raw whole milk. I think that was where I first went, because we could get it here. And, there was basically, it's a live food. So I think it might have upset my stomach a little bit. Yeah. I don't remember drinking copious amounts of milk in the beginning. I feel like, and I might have had some dairy. I maybe had some goat cheese prior to this. But all of a sudden I started eating more cheese, and I had some ice cream, and so I did gain weight. I broke out horribly when I made all these changes. I think my hormones just went, what are you doing? And I think I woke everything back up.
Which a lot of people, when they drink milk, that's one of their complaints, is like acne. The other one is just, diarrhea or all kinds of things. And I've had similar experience like you. When I've done all kinds of experiments in my fitness journey. And one was just, I took out dairy for a long time. And then I had the same thing. I went to, like a co-opportunity here in LA, and I got like the Green Pastures raw milk. And I think I drank about a half gallon of it, because from Russia, and a lot of people drink milk, and, growing up, I drank a lot of milk. So I naturally just love milk. But when I drank it that time, after not having it for a bunch of months, I had bad diarrhea for a few days there. And so you'd think, so your initial reaction is going to be like, well, milk's not good for me because I took it out for a while and now I have it and it's bad for me. Do you think it's that simple?
No, of course not. I mean, yeah. I mean, and raw milk in itself, right? I mean, and we also know thing about cows and how they're eating and what eating their grass. And I mean, just a cow's seasonal change can change the milk in itself. And I mean, and I've had, what is it here? What is the raw milk? Organic pastures?
Green Pastures, I think it's called. I'm pretty sure.
And so, and I've gotten their milk at certain times, and sometimes it's actually created some digestive issues with me, and it's basically, depending on when the cow and where they're feeding and so forth, it can change basically how they are giving the milk. So it could change on you. So does that mean the milk is bad? No. But it couldn't be essentially what the cows are producing. But for most people that haven't been consuming dairy, they might be, they might be lactose intolerant at this point. Their body might not be producing lactase to be able to digest and break down. Because if your body's not doing something for a long time, your small intestine's like, we don't need to do this. We don't need to produce this. You're not consuming any dairy. And so if you add all of a sudden a bunch back in, a cup, 2 cups, 3 cups, 4 cups, your body's like, we aren't producing it. Any lactose. And so, yes, you're probably going to have some bloating, gut issues, diarrhea, all of that could happen.
And plus, usually those people are already have something going on with their guts, right? That because usually people take out dairy for those sort of reasons. They think that something's causing them problems, and they take it out, and then they put it back in. Oh, it's even worse. So
yeah. I mean, I would say 80% of the people I work with have gut issues of some sort. Constipation, diarrhea, bloating, whatever. There's something going on. And so when you add a lot of foods back in, and that's why transitioning from whatever diet you're doing to this needs to be a slow and steady procedure. It should not be A to Z. I know a lot of people go A to Z. I did A to Z. You will have a lot of side effects and things that are not going to be super wonderful feeling. And I mean, you can go that route. I think your body will adapt eventually.
Yeah.
Or you can just go slow and steady and not have to deal with that as much.
Yeah. So do you think lactose intolerance, because that's the term that people throw out there, do you think, is it kind of a real thing? Because I've read studies where, they said they have lactose intolerance and they gave people, I think it was a teaspoon or a tablespoon, I can't remember, of milk every day. And then over time, their guts adjusted. Then they were having half a cup, then they were having a cup, and they were doing just fine.
I think there's probably some people that have a real lactose intolerance. I mean, I pretty much everyone I have worked with, we can usually slowly get them more adapted to drinking milk again. Some adapt pretty easily. Some we have to certainly experiment with different kinds of milk, and kind of depending on where their gut health is. But for the most people, I would say 90%. We can get them back to drinking. So, but do I think some people probably have a true lactose intolerance? Yeah, I think it's out there for sure.
Yeah, some people have it. It's interesting because, but I think people definitely have to try it out first, like you said, starting slow. I really don't think most people are. I think most people are just, like you said, they're just going to have a cup and they're like, I feel terrible, so I'm never going to have it again. So,
Yeah, and that could be, right? And I think that's why you have to understand that that's a possibility. And I think you have to understand, food is like a drug. I mean, it can affect your body that way. Dose is important. And it's like anything. If you become more tolerant of it, you should be able to tolerate more, just like you possibly could with a drug. But this is in a good way. And if your body, especially if your body is in a very hypometabolic mode, and you might have a hard time tolerating anything because you're just not getting the energy to your digestive system. Your pancreas could be affected. Right? Your small intestine, all of these things could be affected that could be affecting how you digest something like milk. And so until you kind of work on fixing those, adding something like milk in might just create more problems. So, maybe you wait on that. Maybe you work on some gut health first and then slowly try to add that back in.
Yeah. I work with some older clients, in their 60s, stuff like that. And all as soon as you get into that age, I think all their doctors always tell them, like, hey, you should be having more calcium. They always, like, no problem. They give them a prescription pill for calcium, But I find that young people or anybody, until you're 65, nobody ever talks about calcium. Why do you think calcium? I mean, why is calcium so important?
Oh, you don't think that? See, I feel like calcium has been a part of my life. I mean, maybe it's just for women, right? And we're told that, maybe that when you're going pre-menopause or what, because you're basically told, low estrogen is going to create a calcium depletion of your bones, which is completely incorrect. In fact, estrogen in itself can create a calcium deficiency in the bones. But essentially, stress in itself, right? It's one of the stress factors. When your body's under stress, parathyroid hormone will rise. It'll pull calcium from the bones to put into the blood. If you don't have enough calcium in the diet, that hormone rises under stress, like all of the other stress mediators. So, people think, I have high calcium in the blood, I shouldn't have any calcium in my diet. And when the exact opposite is true, if you add more calcium, then it won't be pulling it out of your bones. So usually those people have that same thing, bone breakdown. And I've talked to women who are osteopenia, osteoporosis, no calcium, or they're taking a calcium supplement. And, and it's just not ideal. I mean, 99% of your bones is calcium.
Yeah.
And it's one of the minerals that's regulated in the blood, and it has to stay at a certain level. And so that's why, again, if you don't have enough, your body will say, we can just pull it from what we have stored.
Yeah. A lot of, like I said, people that are 20s, 30s, they all think that they're getting plenty of calcium from greens, and that's why it's not really talked about, I feel like, until women and men get older. Looking it up, I think the RDA, the US RDA, it's like 1,000 or 1,200 milligrams, something like that.
It might be even lower, but it's not considerably that high.
Well, we all know how, they're on top of it, with the food recommendations that they give. But I'm just trying to say, my point is that, even the most conventional, organization recommends that. And a cup of spinach has about 35 milligrams, something like that. It's 50 milligrams. It's not even close to having a high dose of calcium. Whereas milk, a cup has 350, 400 milligrams, I think, of calcium.
Yeah. And some people come back and say, hey, these cultures that, basically don't live in an industrialized nation, like cook, make their own food, they survive 200 milligrams of calcium. Right. And they're healthy. And I'm like, that is comparing you live in a stressed world.
Yeah.
And in a stressed world, you need more of these minerals because you're recirculating, and these stress mediators are going to pull them through your system more.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're like, to me, to always do these cultural comparisons is insane, because there's so many differences here for you to say that. You have no idea what is helping and contributing. And maybe if you live like that, that would be fine.
Yeah,
but in our society, you're right? Milk and dairy are your ideal. Usually a serving is going to give you about 300 milligrams per serving. I always like to go into the upper spectrum and recommend between like 1,800, 2,000 milligrams a day. I think that's more ideal. You do have to take in consideration the phosphorus level. That's fairly important. Which, in a diet that's primarily meat, which I had before, it was like I had a very high phosphorus diet to calcium. And when you have those ratios that are off, right, again, it's going to stress the system, and that's when you're going to pull more calcium into the blood. So a low meat and low grain, because those both have high phosphorus and no calcium. High milk, because milk in general is going to have calcium and phosphorus, is going to be more ideal.
And for an average person, what would that be to get that, minimum that you're saying you think is important? 1,800, you said, to 2,000. What would a day of dairy look like that for a person?
You're looking at like 6 to 8 servings.
Wow.
So it could be 2 quarts of milk, could be a quart of milk, and a couple of servings of cheese and some ice cream or some cottage cheese and some yogurt. So I usually like to say 6 to 8 servings.
But like you said, always start slow. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people do. Like you said, start with a tablespoon a day. Yeah. Because your body will slowly shift and adapt. And if you can and then I'm like, okay, do a tablespoon with each meal. Do an ounce with each meal. Do 2 ounces with each meal. And as long as you seem to be tolerating, sooner you can be able to handle, a couple cups a day.
Yeah, it's tough. That's why I think that paleo argument of, what did our caveman do, or what, like you said, it's just so hard if you're an Aborigine and you're just sitting in the mountains chilling all day, like, I think you can do fine with eating just some plants and some meat here and there versus our crazy environment that we live in today. I mean, what are like the biggest, stressors you think to people? Is it like, where are they going wrong? Is sleep? Is it diet? All sorts of things?
I think you look at our world today. You have a pandemic. You have social unrest. You have possibilities of you can't get to work, or you're not at work. So financial, obviously relationship and family, those can be stressors. Putting food on your table. There's a lot of stressors right now. Then we have just environmental, water pollution. I think our water's crappy. I think the air is crappy. I think our food quality, even good food, has a lower mineral content than it used to probably 50 years ago, because our soils are crappy.
Yeah.
So, and then you have EMFs, and you have TV, and you have internet. You have layer on layer on layer, and it's like, this has changed significantly than it was 60 years ago. It's changed since I was a young kid, So yes, we have more things that make our life easy, phones, computers, but we have more drugs, apparently, because people will say, well, medicine is helping. I'm like,
medicine, or San Diego kind of medicine, right? Or what?
But I think everything that the medical community is creating to help people live longer. Ultimately, maybe, and we're not even living longer anymore, but I think we are just creating. That's arguable,
right? Yeah, that's arguable.
We're creating people that are living longer, but are sicker. Yeah. They're on more medications. They're on more drugs. And the environment, and especially, I've talked to a lot of healthy people. San Diego is a pretty healthy place per se.
Yeah.
People are active. They're concerned about what they're eating. They have the money to provide themselves with good food. Yet a lot of them are still in a world where sugar is bad.
Yep.
Dairy is bad. Be restrictive. And all of these people, you start talking to them, they start having issues, especially women. So they're going to start having hormonal issues, which is going to create anxiety, which is going to create sleep issues, and they're going to be hypometabolic, hypothyroid. So then they have elevated cholesterol. So by the time that they're still being healthy, they're on 4 or 5 medications.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I don't think, yes, sleep is a stressor, but I think all those things that I just talked about are creating poor sleep.
Definitely.
So that sleep is the kind of the result of all these other things. But then, yes, poor sleep is also going to be a stressor that's going to make it all kind of just keep going, and when people get into this cycle, your dietary shift is important. Mm-hmm. But usually it's some other lifestyle choices that need to be adjusted to really get your health back.
Yeah. And people are I don't know where it comes from. People are just so pushed into pushing through all that shit. Just shove that down, keep going. You got 5 hours of sleep last night? Well, I got 4. Fuck you. I can do better. It's just, I don't know what it is. People have a hard time. And I think when you're initially teaching people to slow down, to do these things, they, like you said, they have this separation anxiety from, I can't do that. I need to be constantly, on this adrenaline rush all day long.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think our society, our entire society, to me, and I've lived through it. I live through all the stages, right? Mm-hmm. Partying and overworking and over-exercising and pushing really, really hard. I mean, to be honest, when I wrote my book, it was a massive push, even though I was writing out. But I had to work on the weekends, and then but it was a passionate thing for me at that time, so it didn't feel that way, I guess, as much until the end of it. But yeah, was it exhausting? Absolutely. I mean, so there's a certain level of drive, I think, that has to go through to get things accomplished. I think it's just the fact that we don't have these rest periods. I think European cultures, they were much better at that. They used to have a lot of rest time, a lot of vacation time. You work hard and then you rest and recuperate. We started taking that rest and recuperate out of the equation, so just go hard all the time, barely take a vacation, barely rest, keep going, don't recuperate. And then all of a sudden you're hitting walls, and then you think, I cannot stop. So then you go get medicated and you feel like, okay, I feel a little bit better because I've removed some of my symptoms. So instead of adjusting, you don't, you just keep going and keep going until the wheels completely fall off. And by that time, it's not going to take one or two little things to fix you. It's taking a complete lifestyle overhaul to fix you.
Maybe a few years. Yeah. And a lot of people's resting is like, going to Vegas and getting shit-faced for a few days, so, and I don't know if that's resting, drinking a lot, smoking a lot. It's just, it's got to be something.
Yeah, that was usually my definition of a vacation. It was I way more exhausted than I did. And I lived on that high. I mean, I was an adrenaline junkie, and it's a fun place to be. It's just not sustainable. Yeah. And, and if you can realize that earlier on, I wish I'd realized that in my 20s. I didn't. I kept pushing it well into my 30s, and with just different mechanisms. And, the good news is you can pull out of it. My life is very different now. I don't live that way anymore. I just don't want to, for one thing. And I realize I don't have to, but I realize it's just a not sustainable way to live.
So when you were having all your problems and you switched over, how long did it take before you felt like all your problems settled down and everything got better?
Like all the side effects I got broken out. I started having some hormonal issues. That kind of self-corrected in probably 6 months. I would say the weight shift probably closer to a year for things to kind of recalibrate back to that I felt comfortable with. And even at that time, there was still some stuff in my brain. I was just so, I still was a big workout girl at that point, and I used to teach a lot of classes, and so I was still heavy into training a ton at that point, and so that probably didn't serve me very well. I did another 150-mile bike ride, which again, I tried to take everything into consideration.
150 miles, wow! Where'd you do that?
I did it for a ride for charity for cancer. We did up to Julian and back.
Wow.
And, but I think you should have a little bit of these things in your life, but every time I would do something like that, I'd kind of have to refix things. I just realized to not doing them all the time. But if you still love to do things, if you still like to go hike, you should be able to do those things.
Right.
Should you do them every single weekend for massive amounts of time? Probably not, if you're trying to regain your health and keep your health. I think everything is a balance. I think what I like about this work is it allows people to understand themselves better. I think that's the biggest. It's not about teaching you what foods to eat, or it's really about you learning about what my body's trying to tell me, right? Okay, if I have a busy day today, what does that look like for me to stay nourished? What do I need to do? I need to probably have more carbohydrates. I need to make sure I have these things available to me so that you can constantly always keep your body in a sustainable place. And, that's the whole point, so that your body's not ever lagging, that you're not ever pushing it into that high stress state where bad things happen. And so it's really trying to figure out, how you can constantly support yourself.
Yeah. So you mentioned, carbohydrates, and, the low carb diet is so popular right now. It's the carnivore, the keto. How do you, because people are kind of, and especially when you're low carb, you really start thinking that I don't really need carbohydrates, because you think you're doing just fine with muscle meats, and you're doing fine with fat, and you feel pretty good. I mean, your book is called How to Heal Your Metabolism. And what is the real fuel for your metabolism? Is it carbohydrate?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, your body runs on glucose.
Right.
It'll always pick glucose as its first line of energy.
Yeah. Meaning if I give you an avocado and some honey with it, your body was going to use the honey up first.
Well, that depends. It depends on the state of your health, right?
Right.
If you're
coming
if you're coming from a keto adaptive state, then your body, what will happen is it'll try to use the fat and just raise your blood sugar level. So that might feel pretty crappy to you. So you have to remember, going into a keto or a carnivore state is a very adaptive state. I mean, your body is learning to run on fat or ketones. It's, so the body is now adapted away from sugar. Yeah. So when you add sugar back in, if you add too much at one time, you will feel like complete dog shit. And
most people do, right? When they first switch over, or vice versa too, right? Yeah, when they're switching over.
They have massive blood sugar swings. They feel worse. They feel anxious, especially if you do it too quickly. You need to let the body shift back slowly. So it's like small, consistent meals, especially if you've been like intermittent fasting, right? If you've been doing like one meal or 2 meals a day, low carb, you're going to have to go micro meals with a little bit to allow your body to start utilizing it.
So the best way of doing that, you're saying, is to maybe have some carbs, some fat, and some protein at each meal. Is that the way you would go about it?
100%. Yeah. Because that combo is going to help balance it into your blood sugar, right? Just having a ton of carbohydrates at once, especially in a system that's not used to having them, will just elevate blood sugar level, elevate it. So you're going to start going on the blood sugar roller coaster.
Yeah. And just having
a lot of people are like, I just don't do well on carbs because when I eat them, I feel like garbage.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so let's go at a slower pace. Maybe we need to get 20% carbohydrates, some fat, some protein in a meal, not too big, and then see how that does for you. How does that make you feel? Okay, that felt pretty good. Okay, then do that every 2 or 3 hours for a while, and then we'll slowly start shifting the macronutrients. All right, now add a little bit more carbohydrates. Let's see how you do. It is a constant adjustment. I mean, this isn't just because I do have people contacting me like, can you just write me up a plan? And I'm like, no, I can't, and it wouldn't be beneficial to you if I did. It would be because I don't know what you're doing now, and that is important. And what you're doing now needs to slowly change into something that makes it more supportive for your body. And I don't want to go too fast, and I don't want to add things in that I think might constantly trigger you or give you some digestive upset. So everything's a slow, consistent process.
Yeah. So working with somebody like you is good because you can kind of help coach them along the way. Yeah.
I think so. I mean, to me, I think if you can do it on yourself, the information to be able to do it is totally in that book. Like, it's there. If you can apply it in a way that works for you, it is available. And some people do that, and that's all they need. For a good part of people, it's too much for them to wrap their head around, and especially with women, old beliefs starting to come in a way, and they're still fearful of sugar. They're still fearful of dairy, and as soon as they, eat something and they think, oh my God, I've had too much carbohydrates. They just, I'm just going to not eat anymore. So they start with that old, your brain, it will play tricks on you, and it likes to be consistent, and it likes, things to feel safe. And even if your bad habits were horrible, it felt safe in that place. And so to get you out of your comfort zone. Your brain thinks there's more threat involved in that.
Yeah.
So it stresses you a little bit.
Of course.
And
Which makes things even worse, and you go even more on that roller coaster ride. Yeah.
Right.
Going slowly is the way. Yeah, because even me when I because I've also been lower carb for the most part of my fitness journey, and it's like as soon as I would have some carbs, I would get fat right away. If I had some rice, if I had some potatoes, right away get fat. And then so instinctively you think, well, then it must be the carbohydrates that's the problem. And so you start eating less, and then you start eating less, and then less, and then less. And then that was for me when I got to a point where I started thinking, well, maybe that's not a sign of a healthy metabolism, because, we're always jealous of those people that go to McDonald's every day and, eat all kinds of shit, and they have a 6-pack and they're lean. And they just look great no matter what they eat. It's like, I wish I was that person, but I'm not. But I think, so do you think what really separates those type of people is just that metabolism? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I can, you see it more with men than women, because I think women learn at a very young age that they're going to start dieting, and women are just, horrible creatures in today's world where they're constantly comparing with their friend, and and they realize real quick they can control their weight by eating less.
Yeah, and
so that's what they do. And men, on the other hand, especially if they're an athlete, they have to eat an enormous amount of food to keep that, and they have. Yeah. The more the androgen hormones, so they have higher levels of testosterone, growth hormone going through them, that they can just consume so many more calories and still be very, very lean.
Yeah.
And so, it's not like all women are like, some women athletes can do that as well. They're not, I wouldn't say, the super petite ones that all these girls want to be, so. But
which is funny because the culture is slowly changing, though. I think not everybody wants to be petite anymore, so it's good.
Maybe not. Yeah, I think some it is. Maybe that 80s, Kardashian 90s swing or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that maybe that has shifted. Although they're on their own obsessions.
But I mean, they're all natural. Obviously, that's just eating. They're.
But point being is, I do think women end up doing more destruction quite early for long periods of time. It starts certainly becoming a mental thing with them.
Right.
That's why you see so many more eating disorders and binge. Not to say it's not within men as well. I certainly see it a lot more in women. And so I think women very early on do some damage. And then they try to keep that under wraps for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Right. And and they do it with exercise, and they try to eat precise and precision, and it's just a constant with them. Where for men, if they've been active, it doesn't seem to be, it could be well into their 30, 40, 50s, or even later, that even some never even have an issue, or maybe it's they get out of college and they're not as active anymore, and now they start beer drinking or whatever and start eating more crap, and they're not as active and they start gaining weight. And can certainly play a role. But my experience is those that have dieted the most usually have the most metabolic damage.
Right. And so, and there's probably many things that women are doing wrong. But I mean, as far as today, 2020, I mean, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that, or just things that women can do just to help fix those problems that they're having?
The biggest thing that I would see that a lot of women have is they become vegan.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly detrimental to a woman's health, not only nutritionally, but usually what happens, they don't get nearly enough protein in. And so you start seeing massive hormonal issues. You see a lot of estrogen dominance. They start getting PCOS. So, and a lot of it is their liver's not being supported. So it's unable to detoxify the estrogen. And so they're going to start getting these wonderful hormonal imbalances, which at that point they might go to the doctor and they say, oh, let's put you on the pill.
Yeah.
That'll help you, which creates more, or they think they're going crazy. So like, you just need an antidepressant. They put them on that.
SSRIs.
Right. So you see these young women that are getting on 2 or 3 medications at the age of 20. None of them are really doing their health any good.
Yeah.
And they're still eating vegan because they think it's super healthy for them. And they're, and a lot of them, can you be a healthy vegan? I think it's pretty hard. I think if you probably were eating a ton of food and you were making it all yourself, you might have a better chance.
Yeah.
But if, today's world, if it's hip, there's a lot of prepackaged vegan food out there. So it's highly processed. And then I see they're getting like these fake cheeses and fake milks and burgers, and all of it has a ton of polyunsaturated fat in it. And so all of it isn't particularly healthy for you. So I think, a lack of animal proteins is very detrimental to somebody's health.
Yeah, which, and they also come from a place of sympathy. And, I've talked about this with another guest, Kyle Mamunis, is like there's some sort of thing with people that we feel as if we're being more spiritual when we're avoiding all animal products, as if we're kind of ascending this realm kind of thing,
And I think it's with every young generation, there's a level of we're saving the world that comes out. Yes. And so they're given this belief, you can look back in history and see it in the 70s.
Right.
That there's this huge, we're going to change the world.
Free love.
Going on. Yeah, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And I think, again, they're getting a lot of information out of complete context and running with it. And then going, we're going to animal rights, all the animals are creating all this pollution, and they don't understand the big picture, I think, of what's really happening. And so they hang on to that because it sounds good and it seems like that should be the right answer.
Right.
But it's just not when you look at it in the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And so and a lot of people, I talk to them and they'll be like, I just will not eat any animal food. I'm like, well, it's going to really affect your health. So you have to make a choice at this point. It's either do you want your health back, or do you want to feel like you're protecting animals that if we weren't eating them, other animals would eat them? Because
it's a flawed ideology. Right? Yeah, it's a flawed ideology, because also all those beans that you want to eat, right? I mean, other animals were kept away from all those beans, right? When they're being farmed. I mean, other things are killed. Deers are killed. Little bugs are killed, which, that reminds me of Paul's Czech philosophy, where he talked about there's really nothing that's vegetarian because even the plants eat, mycorrhiza in the soil. And I think it's true. I mean, we do have this obsession, right? Where it's like a cow is cute, a bug is not cute, so it's okay. That can die. Cow can't die. It's not good.
Yeah, and I love animals. I'm a huge animal lover, so I would feel like if all of a sudden I grew up with this cow and I created this bond, I probably would have a really hard time eating that cow.
For sure.
There might be that part of it, and I can understand that, but I also understand a bigger picture that a lot of, again, get the best sources that you can. I do think industrializing the farming industry created this. Basically, we were creating, we used to have the cows on the farm, and the manure would be used to fertilize all the farming, and it was a good cycle. But now that we've industrialized and separated everything, it just doesn't work anymore. Now all the manures and everything that the gases and the cows are producing is becoming toxic because it's not being utilized properly. Whereas all the soils now are being under fertilized, and so they're not giving enough nutrients to our food anymore. And so the system that we created to essentially make food cheaper and make more money isn't really working. It's taking this time to do this, and but we're not really being told that, or will we ever be told that, because there's too many people's lobbying in our government areas, and there's too much money involved at this point to ever come back and say, you know what, all of this sucks. It's horrible for
corn
us.
And wheat. Yeah, it's still good.
Everything we do, soy, corn, wheat, all this stuff we've mass producing is horrible for you.
Yeah, so
food, horrible for you. It'll never ever happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I've talked to a lot of vegans, and they're, the smarter ones, they have the studies ready. They'll pull out studies that say, soy or tofu is just as the same quality protein as beef, or they have these studies. I don't know how the fuck they do these studies, but they find these studies where and it's like, hey, okay, I mean, you don't really need to eat animal products. I mean, how do you have that talk with somebody like that?
I mean, I don't know if they're analyzing soy to meat. To me, it's like, how is your body assimilating it? So I definitely understand that the other components that are coming in with a vegetable protein are not being able to be utilized by the human body. It's usually assumed that you have to have double the vegetable protein to get the same amount of animal protein.
Yeah.
And nobody does that. I mean, in fact, it's probably the opposite. They probably have 50% of the protein. So, if you were getting a massive amount, But the protein sources are coming bound in food that's really hard for our human body to break down. So yes, maybe that protein source is fine when you look under it under a microscope, but how is our body able to break it down and utilize it is the next question.
That's the big one, right? And they call that bioavailability, right? Basically, like how well you can absorb that, and that's the thing. And I think, like you said, so that's kind of for those people that are confused, because it's just like you said, they're looking at it under a microscope. They look the same, and that's great, but when you put it inside your body and gets digested by enzymes and all kinds of things are happening in your digestive tract, I mean, they become two very, very, very different things.
Yeah. And I think that, like I said, sugar in a cookie and sugar in your fruit, you might both look like sugar, but the way they're coming into your system and the other components that they're coming in with makes that food very different, and your body will have a different effect from it. Mm-hmm. So again, you're looking at one little blippet of a scenario, and you need to kind of open your lens up and see everything there. And, I mean, I usually have no desire to argue with anyone about their food choices if they're happy. If they're good, I'm like, keep doing what you're doing. If that makes you happy and you feel good, then all the more power to you, right?
Yeah. The sad part, it's just and I'm not in that business either. But it's just the sad part that I do find I have sympathy for people that they say they're doing great, but again, you see them not eating a lot, and they're very skinny, and they have all kinds of problems and anxiety, and then they go to their doctor and they're told, that's in your head, Kate. You're crazy. It's just in your head. I mean, what are you thinking? Yeah.
Well, that is you have it, and you have it a medical system being supported by the pharmaceutical companies that basically their way to help you is to figure out what your symptom is and then give you a remedy drug.
Yeah.
Right.
And they down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you don't go to your doctor anymore for a 2-hour visit. They're not sitting down. Tell me about your life. How are you doing? What's going on? Mm-hmm. How's your diet? What's your stress like? What's happening? What's going on with your symptom? Okay. Yep. I can give you this. That's your conversation. So.
Yeah. And do you ever use labs as something, or blood work as something that, you can base off your diet recommendations to people?
I don't need it. But if someone has it, I definitely look at it. I think it can give you some information, certainly. If someone's coming in, they have a high TSH, they have super high cholesterol, they have low vitamin D, you can take a good gamble of some things that might be happening to them and why they might be feeling so crappy. But is it necessary? I mean, I think if you kind of look at their symptoms, you look at their temperature and pulse, how are they feeling? Tell me what you're doing. Tell me what you're eating. I personally like to use Chronometer, to log food. I think it's a pretty good assessment tool that kind of lets you see all the minerals, the vitamins, nutrients, and whether it's 100% correct is kind of irrelevant. It just kind of says, all right, this is where we might be lacking. Yeah, these are the things we might need to support you. Work on eating these foods. I think it gives you a little better, and people never realize that how nutrient deficient. Some people have 2,000 calories in their diet, and they are like 30% of all their nutrients. Because the diet is just not supported with enough nutrient-dense food. Yeah.
Those are great. So, you don't rely too much upon those screenshots, kind of. To me, blood work is like screenshot, right? Because it's like in that moment, in that time. And I've had friends who actually took blood, same time and sent to, one person took their different samples, sent them in, and both samples were a little different, and I think that's happens quite a lot to people. So I think people get...
I actually had same blood, same day, 2 different cholesterol checks, because I think I purchased some labs online, and both of them had a cholesterol profile. Came back, and there was literally a 25% difference in the cholesterol numbers. Wow. Same blood.
Yep.
Same lab.
That's crazy. Right? So, yeah, but the more crazy part is that how easy a doctor could look at something like that and give you a pill just like that. Boom, here we go. Statin or, SSRI or whatever the fuck else you need. I'll give it to you just off that one little screenshot that you have.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you can talk to people to find out how that doesn't work. I mean, maybe it works a little, I guess. I mean, maybe they come back and they say, especially with something like thyroid, they come in, you have high TSH, like here's some Synthroid, put you on some Q4, not even considering the other factors that could be interfering with that. or thyroid conversion, that's not even taken into consideration. You come back, nothing's happening. All right, let me give you more. Let me give you more. Nothing's happening, right? And they're not, why is this hormone not working? Right? There's no question of that. It's just mind-boggling to me, where I get to see people and they're like, I'm on this much thyroid. And I'm like, what? Does it feel any different? Nope. He's raised it like 5 times. No different. So why don't we look at some other things that maybe could be happening right now that's allowing, it's not allowing you to convert it.
No,
or,
that's in your head, Kate. What are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there's missing a part of this conversation. And I think, and a lot of it, I don't blame them. I mean, I think they're overloaded with so much information about these little intrinsic things that go into the human body and all the drugs that have to correlate with all that. And there's so many in today's world that it doesn't give them time to sit there and literally critically think with each patient about everything that could possibly going on to making a difference for them. And, it's unfortunate.
You can't blame them, but it is what it is. But that's the system we've created. And I don't know if it'll ever, change. I mean, do you recommend any of your clients go see alternative health kind of doctors or whatever, naturopaths or anything like that? They seem to be about the same way, right? They kind of have their own issues.
I think that was a good idea in the beginning. I think at least they are a little bit more alternative, and they'll look at some different labs. They'll do more labs. I mean, or maybe they'll get they get more labs. But I feel like they do even more extensive labs that cost more money.
Oh yeah.
Some talk about your diet, but I mean, I have so many people I talk to that go to functional medicine doctors are told to go on a low carb diet.
Yeah.
And then they come out with $300 worth of supplements.
Oh yeah.
So they're not getting a drug, but then they're getting all these supplements. And I'm like, you're deficient. Your body is so broken down right now that do you really think that your body can handle these 10 supplements that you're taking it?
Those labs are $500 a lab. Yeah. I've done some of them, sadly. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I like to see myself. I get labs on myself about every 3 or 4 months. Because for me, I just like to see shifts. I like to pay attention to things and so forth. So I like to experiment a lot. So I like to test things. But do I think they're necessary to find out if something's going on with somebody? No, I don't. I think that you can get really far without a lot of labs. I think some people do need them if they're doing a lot of things right and nothing's shifting. Then it might be, okay, let's get a little bit more information and see if we can find something else out.
Right. But for the average person, so what are the things that you would recommend? Of course, keeping track of your temperature, and what should that be? And how about your pulse rate? Just what, the things that average person can keep track of to help themselves.
So if you're going to start monitoring your own health, first I would say food log, like start logging to see what you're eating, how much you're eating. You should be minimum like 80 to 100 grams of protein, minimum 200 grams of carbohydrates, fat. To me, there's no real prescribed amount unless you're trying to lose weight. But those are barely minimums, and that's if you have very little activity. And so I think that's a good guideline. Your temperature should be around 97.8 when you wake up, and should go up to a 98.6 midday. It sometimes can go a little bit hotter, depending on, those are just general guidelines. But pulse should be around 75 to 90 beats per minute. It shouldn't be 40, which if you are an endurance athlete, that's probably what it's going to be. It's going to be quite low. Yep. So you want, metabolically speaking, things to be hotter and a little bit higher to be in a healthier place.
And that means your metabolism is moving, things are going. So, and if you're having any, because the word metabolism can be confusing for some people. I mean, how would you define that?
I describe it as the sum of every metabolic process that's going on in your body. So everything that's happening in your system, it's the sum of all of that, right? And so when your body is running optimally and everything's getting enough fuel, you're going to sleep well. You're going to, have good digestion. You're going to have a bowel movement at least once a day. You're going to urinate 4 or 5 times a day, not 25 times. You're going to have restful, good, deep sleep. You're going to be in a good mood. You should be able to maintain your weight without excessive exercise and dieting. It shouldn't be like this constant struggle. Yeah. You shouldn't have binging or that desire. I mean, food, it should be secondary. I mean, you should like food, but it shouldn't be that constant thing on your mind all the time. You should be able to think clearly. You shouldn't be that brain foggy, and so you should feel well. You should have decent energy all day long, and so if something is compromised, and you should be able to be fertile, you should have a pain-free period. You should want to have sex, and if people come in, they're like, I could care less about sex. I have a horrible period. My digestion sucks.
Yep.
I have to work really hard to maintain my weight. Then something isn't working optimally. And so it's counterintuitive for them to think you have to actually eat more to have your weight to be more stable.
Yeah.
But systems in your body, because it's the sum of everything, are being depleted. And so we have to get those things more fueled. And sometimes you have to go into a more resting state, because if you're constantly having deposits taken from you, meaning exercise or stress, that's all going to take energy. And if you don't have enough coming in, then your body's going to basically take it from other areas of your body that might need it. And so until we can provide those areas with enough fuel, you're going to continue to have issues.
That's perfect. Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's perfect. Is there anything else you could recommend to one, if one person, just a person wants to do something today, would it be cooking at home by themselves more often? Or, what can they do just to start somewhere? Because so, like you said, people are so confused with all the voices that are happening.
Yeah. Honestly, I'd tell them to read my book. That I think is the easiest and best place to start.
And the name of your book is?
It is. Oh, I don't even have a copy. It's called How to Heal Your Metabolism.
Beautiful. And it's available on Amazon, on Kindle. I have it on Kindle, for example. Oh, you got it?
Oh, no, here it is. I have one copy with all my notes in it. There you go. Feel like a picture. That would honestly be one of the, or, follow me on Instagram at Kate Deering Fitness. I think one of the quickest things that people can do to shift is change out their fats. If you're using liquid fats, I think we don't really talk about polyunsaturated fats that much, but a lot of your liquid fats can be completely anti-metabolic. So using things like coconut oil or butter to cook with versus any of the liquid oils, even olive oil, is going to be a lot healthier for you. So I think that one shift can really change someone's health.
Maybe we can touch up on them really quick. The way that I go about it is like, do you think, we should be gathering all these seeds and all these crazy weird plants and squeezing them down into a little liquidy, oily bottle? I don't think that sounds quite, the term natural is very abused these days, and I get it, because the other people will say, well, this computer's not natural, or whatever. So, but it just seems like something shouldn't be in our bodies.
I think they were manufactured oils that were cheap to make. We started using vegetable oils and corn oils because they were very cheap to produce, and we thought they were vegetarian, so they got to be healthier. And then we found out that using these oils can actually lower cholesterol. Right. So of course they have to be healthier if they have that effect. Yes. Again, without understanding contextually how these were working. A lot of these oils work one way in suppressing your immune system. They also have an effect on your liver. So those things can lower your cholesterol levels, but is it a good thing? No, not necessarily. The thing that should optimally help lower cholesterol levels is having optimal thyroid function, because that's what's needed to convert the cholesterol into your steroidal hormones. Yeah.
And pretty much if you go into any restaurant or anywhere, out, they're usually using those oils. Not a lot of restaurants are cooking in straight butter or coconut oil.
No, because again, they're promoted as the heart-healthy fats, right? Again, misunderstood, used as a marketing ploy to sell a lot of them, and they're cheap. Yeah. And because they're cheap, restaurants buy them. Like, soy oil, corn oil, all of that, canola, that's what your food is being cooked at all these, unless you're going to a French cuisine, which they might be using butter. Nobody really uses coconut oil because it's saturated, and they just, for some reason, but, for the most part, you're going to get, if you're going out to eat, your food is being cooked in some sort of vegetable oil. And so it's not ideal. That's why I always say, if you want to get healthy, minimize your out to eat eating. Because it's just not going to be ideal for you.
And your book has lots of cool recipes, which I really like. So people can use those.
Definitely. There's food options, food ideas, recipes, a complete explanation, how to get all your nutrients with the foods that you're eating. It does give you a full understanding of what and how you can nourish yourself to get better without the use of drugs or supplements or anything like that. Because, you shouldn't need them. I think sometimes that you can use supplements to help support you.
Sure.
But I mean, that's 1% of the answer. It's,
Yeah.
you know, food first, lifestyle shifts, maybe a supplement.
Love it. Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure, Leo. No problem.
It's been awesome. Maybe we can
Thanks
do it again
for,
sometime.
Yeah, let me know. Thanks for waiting for me today.
No problem. So just again, Instagram, Kate Deering, I think, right?
Kate Deering Fitness.
Kate Deering Fitness, book, How to Heal Your Metabolism. Get it on Amazon, folks.
Yep.
I'll chat with you later. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Leo. Bye.